is a house built out of stone, wooden floors, walls and window sills, tables and chairs warmed by all of the dust. This is a place where I don't feel alone. This is a place where I feel at home. By the cracks of his skin I climbed to the top. I climbed the tree to see the world. When the guys came around to blow me down, held on as tightly as you held on to me, held on as tightly as you held on.
And suicide is rampant. Recently, in our area, we have a lot of school-based mental health programs and up north. And there have been so many suicide attempts. I literally last week had a school counselor call me, and she said, I just spoke with the acute inpatient hospital trying to get another kid placed. And she said, I was blown away. She says that just our school, she said, we're seeing 1 to 2 attempts, full-blown attempts a week. And the crisis person told her, no, it's everywhere. It is absolutely heartbreaking. And untreated mental health issues, or when we just treat the symptoms, like we talked about, last night and earlier today, when we just treat the symptoms, it can go into full-blown suicide. I mean, kids can get to that point. So once again, we have to begin to look deeper. We have to begin to put on that new set of eyes that I talked about last night. We have to understand that when we see kids who have these horrible behavioral problems and emotional problems, they're not crazy. They're not weird. There's a reason for those behaviors. Remember, the seed is planted and it's coming to the surface, so we can either deal with it or stuff it back down. And when we stuff it back down, guess what happens to the kid? It just feeds the belief that I'm worthless, it's never going to happen, and then there you go, okay? So we have to train our eyes to look deeper. Now, one of the things that when I do trainings, I'm very thankful. I get to do a lot of trainings across the state of Arkansas. I've trained a lot of teachers and school counselors and nurses, but here lately I've been training students and basically showing that video and then teaching them how to pull those seeds from their heart. And it's really amazing because kids are so ready. Like, they're desperate. They've went through the system, just like I shared with you in my story for years. I tried just about everything to stop the pain. Kids are ripe and ready. They just need us. They need us to be the hands of love. They need us to be there to help them. So for me, early identification of children and teens with mental health issues is the best suicide prevention. If you wait to the place that the child is having an attempt and they're there, you can still help them. We see lots of kids and teens completely overcome that and not want to do it again. The young lady that was here last night, she hasn't thought about that suicide in over 2 years. So yes, they are curable. They're not hopeless. But we have to see that first of all. And second of all, the best way to prevent that is to deal with it here. Start noticing, what do I look for if my child has mental health issues? What do I look for if you work in the school teachers, school counselors, in church, Sunday school? If I see kids that have, what am I looking for? They're weeds. Look for the weeds. Look for the behavioral problems. Look for the emotional problems. That's basically the mind, remember, telling you there's a seed, there's a seed, there's a seed. There's something there. So one of the things I like to train is there's obvious symptoms. There's the outward symptoms, okay? And I'm just going to kind of briefly go through some of these. Look for kids who get in trouble often. Their behaviors are telling you something. Kids who have dropping grades, hyperactivity, impulsivity, lying, inattention. We tend to see the child that lies as just a society says, you're a bad kid, you're a liar. There's a reason they're lying. I shared this in the PTSD session earlier, but I had a little boy at our clinic several years ago, or one of our therapists did, and he almost destroyed the bathroom at the clinic. He had thrown and pulled some pictures off the wall. He had thrown toilet paper everywhere. He was just in an absolute frenzy. From the outside looking in, he needed some good old discipline. You know what I mean? And a lot of people in the waiting room may have thought he's just a bad kid. But a few days later, he told the therapist that he looked down the hallway and he saw the psychiatrist with a ponytail. And that reminded him of his abuser. So guess what he did? He went into fight, flight, or freeze mode. Now, he may not have been able to tell you in that moment. Most likely, he couldn't have told you why he did that. The subconscious is powerful. But he went into fight mode. I'll kill you before you kill me. So we have to understand that the behavior symptoms that we see We can't judge a garden by its weeds. We have to look past that, and we have to look deeper. Other things you want to look for is tantrums, social withdrawal, aggression, bullying. Now, I'm not saying that a one-time event where a child has a tantrum, a lot of things are age appropriate. But if you see reoccurring themes, you see this every Sunday in class, you see this every day in your class at school, start watching. There is a reason for those behaviors. Now, sometimes that's really hard because they trigger us. You know, you're in my face telling me I'm all these things and telling me I'm stupid. We have to step back and we have to realize that most of the time it's not about us. We are a reminder probably of something that happened to them. The perfume, the cologne you're wearing may trigger something in that child, and that child couldn't tell you that, and you may have no idea, but they're in your face screaming. But subconsciously it reminded them of something. We have to remember those things. It's most always not about us. Kids who cry easily, self-regulation, they have a tough time with self-regulation. It's all or none. 0 to 60 and 5.2. They have trouble with self-regulation. My little Bella, I shared that earlier too. She had a lot of PTSD issues because she had surgeries, 3 surgeries before a year and a half old. And so when she'd get upset, it was skyrocketed. Okay? So you want to watch for those things. Once again, some kids are just sensitive. That's how they were made. But if you see this and it's all the time crying over everything, that weed is telling you something. There's an issue going on. Look for kids who get upset over trivial matters, who get lost in books, reading, don't socialize on the playground, or they stay away from other kids and they just get lost in their own little world. They probably have a lonely seed in there. Okay? So start watching for that. Kids who stay tired often, bruising, marks on their body, kids who wear heavy clothes in the heat. One of the first kids I worked with years ago was this little 3rd grader, and she would come to school in the August heat with a coat zipped up to here, heavy coat, long sleeves. And I knew in my heart from training that something's not right here. What's happening? We went through all the questions, and no, nothing, She would soil her pants a lot. We knew there was something going on. Found out a few months later when I built that trust with her and I became that bigger, wiser, stronger, and she felt safe with me. She had been being raped by her stepdad. She was clothing herself so that she could hide herself. So watch for things that just don't make sense, okay? Behaviors that just don't make sense. Stomach pains and headaches. Earlier, once again, we talked about in the PTSD about being stuck and helpless. When a child feels stuck, think about that. If you were physically stuck, okay, if I'm sitting here stuck and I can't move, eventually I'm going to feel like I've got a pressure headache, like I just want to bang my head on a wall. My stomach may start hurting. Well, subconsciously, kids get stuck. And sometimes it's because there's a trauma that has not fully come to the surface, and so it manifests in their body, okay? So it doesn't mean if you have a bellyache every once in a while that you have a trauma, but what I'm saying is watch for those themes, okay? Watch for subtle signs. Don't always assume the kids with the obvious symptoms are the only ones who need mental health intervention. I shared my story with you last night about the perfectionist behaviors. Sometimes those kids are the ones that are hurting the most, okay? You're overachievers. What they're trying to show you is I'm not good enough, so I'm constantly trying to be better. So you have to watch for that. Watch for kids who pretend that everything is okay when something goes wrong and tries to avoid the subject. Well, that's a subconscious coping skill. We all probably do that to some degree. But if they're constantly gone, don't want to deal with it, don't want to talk about it, that's a sign, okay? Watch for kids who numb their feelings, have lack of emotion. Watch for children who are loners and would prefer to stay by themselves. Jokesters, drama queens, kids who are overachievers. Now, here's the big one that you need to watch for. All of those are issues. But when you start seeing kids talk about hopelessness, and you see themes of hopelessness, when they're journaling or they just give up, that is a big deal, a very big deal. I'm going to read the definition of hopelessness to you. Having no expectation of good or success, despairing, not susceptible to remedy or cure, giving no ground for hope, desperate, incapable of solution, management, or accomplishment. Impossible. Doesn't it almost take your breath away just to hear that? Okay? I always like to tell trained teachers and students that hopelessness is a driver to suicide. Let me tell you, they're on the fast track. When a child feels helpless, they can move into survival mode. Remember, we talked about that. I don't have those 7 and 8 needs met. I don't feel loved, valued, needed, accepted. I don't feel like I belong. I'm not safe. I'm not secure. So to get my needs met, I'll do whatever it takes to feel loved, right? We grab on. We're helpless. We feel stuck. So that's where the addictions occur. I'll grab on anything to make myself feel better, to feel loved and valued. But it's almost like when the child has been in survival mode for so long and they keep fighting and they keep fighting and they keep fighting and they start giving up and they're succumbing to the water and they start emotionally drowning. We have to understand that hopelessness can lead to suicide. The Jason Foundation is a wonderful organization that has lots of free resources. If you or someone you know is struggling with suicide thoughts, definitely visit their website. Jason was the man that started this foundation. He lost his son to suicide. His name was Jason. And so he's devoted his life to help others not have to experience what he experienced. But one of the things he talks about is suicide warnings. Talking about suicide, making statements about feeling hopeless, helpless, or worthless, a deepening depression, preoccupation with death. Look for themes. Look for their drawings, their journaling, okay, of death, wanting to die. Taking unnecessary risk or exhibiting self-destructive behaviors. I shared with you the little girl last night. And I try to train teenagers that you might dabble in cutting. You know, that's an addiction. And at first, it can be like anything else. You know, when you feel helpless, you'll grab at something. Now, for me, I shared my story with you. I grabbed at food, right, and exercising. Gave me a little bit of relief. Well, kids may dabble in cutting, okay? They may dabble in drugs and alcohol. But when they're dabbling in it in that place where their heart feels helpless and stuck, it can turn into a full-blown addiction because it made me feel good. So now I want it every time I turn around. So that's why I tell teens, be careful what you dabble in because it can become full-blown. And so the young lady last night that I talked about, she would cut so deeply, that was her escape. I always see that as a fight, flight, or freeze. Flight, cutting, escaping the pain. I want out, okay? Out of character behavior, a loss of interest in the things one cares about. Visiting or calling people one cares about. Making arrangements, setting one's affairs in order. We had a young lady in a school a few years ago that she went to school and she had given away all of her name brand jeans. She just went to school and was giving them away. Thank goodness a counselor understood that. That was a big flag, called the mom. The mom was looking in the bedroom and found a suicide note. She went to school and she was making her exit, saying goodbye, giving her things away. We have to watch for those things. Giving prized possessions away. So what can you do? 1, refer the child to counseling. Get them help. Get them help. School counselors. My heart and passion is to train in the schools and train as many school counselors as I can because a lot of times in the school systems, a mental health therapist, if I make a hotline call on a family because of something that happened, that child's probably never going to enter the counseling world again. But a school counselor can get in there and work with that child. They can help their little heart. They can dig with them. They can use sand tray. So there's a lot of school counselors across the state that are actually trained in sea digging. And I'm hoping that we'll have even more. The other thing we can do is use words and actions to help get the child out of hopeless mode. And I'm going to go through some specific details here in a few minutes and some strategies. But one of the things when I have a kid that comes into my office or I know they're at that helpless point, I paint this picture for them. Really what I'm doing is I'm speaking to the heart. Every one of us, remember we talked about that, there's 2 parts of our brain, there's 2 parts of us. You speak to the child within. I'll start speaking to their little heart and I'll say, listen, right now it feels like you're in a dark cave and everything is caving in around you, and it's dark and it's cold and you're scared and you're all alone, and you feel like the darkness is just consuming you. You feel like it's hopeless. But I want you to start looking for the light at the end of the tunnel. Start looking in the roof. Start looking in the ceiling or the cave. Start looking for the pinhole of light. It's coming. I'm coming after you. You hear me? I'm coming after you. Your teacher, and I'll designate a teacher and say, tell them this. Your teacher is coming after you. Your counselor's coming after you. We are not going to leave you there by yourself. I'm instilling hope into their heart. Don't give up. You know, last night, the story with Hillary, did you notice there really wasn't much that happened in that session, but what was I saying to her heart? You are loved. You are valuable. I need you here. I accept you just the way you are. I'm speaking those 7 and 8 needs to a child's heart. And by doing the cave scenario, I'm speaking to the security. Security basically means I know that somehow, some way it'll be okay. There's some type of hope. So by doing the cave analogy, you're speaking to the security things. Because with hopelessness, it's a cycle. It's never going to get better. It's never going to get better. It's never going to get better. Have you all seen the new movie Trolls? I love that movie. My girls love that movie. But the Bergens, they just walk around in this hopeless, unless they eat a troll, they can never have happiness. Ever, 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 ever. So they walk around just singing these songs, and it's just so, like, hopeless. And so it's really cute. That just came to my mind, so I had to share that with you. If you have not seen that movie, you need to watch it. But hopelessness is a drag. I mean, it drags you down. It sucks the life out of you. So you've got to instill hope. In a dark room, it takes one little candle to make the darkness go away, okay? That's why we're here. Love is present, whether you see it or not. Love is there. So we have to help them see that, and we have to help them understand that. So one of my favorite parts of my job is that I get to go around also, and I get to train mental health therapists in our school settings, and I get to train them with one-on-one sessions. So if they have a child that they've tried entry-level seed digging and they're not really quite getting the seed, I'll go there and I'll help them. In this one particular school, I had a therapist call me, and she said, Shawna, I've got this teenager. She said, he's oppositional defiant. She said he's in trouble all the time. He doesn't care about anything. He's constantly telling the teachers, I don't care. He doesn't do his work. He's got a chip on his shoulder. She's like, he smokes pot. He drinks alcohol excessively. He really doesn't care. He has no motivation, bad attitude, really tough kid. And she's like, I don't know what to do. So I went to the school, and at the beginning of the session, the therapist did something that was very, very, very key. She started the session with her, it was her and I and the young man in the room. And she starts the session, and she's saying to me, looking at him, she's like, he is such a good kid. She's like, he is such a good kid. She's like, I just want to find something to motivate him. She said he tells people he doesn't care, he's in trouble, and she's telling me all those things. She's like, I know better. He's a good kid. She's like, I just want to find something to help him. Okay, that's what she started the session by saying. So he allowed me to start digging with him. In a matter of minutes, he ends up in this memory, this horrible memory. And he said, I just remember being really little. He was about 4. And he said, my mom and dad had gotten in this horrible fight. He said, my dad was raging drunk. And he said, I just remember my dad trying to punch my mom, and he missed, and he hit my brother instead. And he's like, I'm standing back, and he's like, my brother's over there bleeding. And he's like, my mom is screaming. And he's like, I quickly decided I have to fix this. Remember me telling you that kids are little superheroes in a tiny body? True story. They're tiny, they're just superheroes. And so in his little way, he tries to fix it the only way he knows how. He runs over to his brother and is trying to make him feel better while he's bleeding. And then he runs over to mom, and mom's screaming and in a panic saying, I'm going to leave and never come back. And so he decides that he'll be a better boy. So he goes to school, and he tries harder in preschool. And then he tries to keep his room clean, tries to be a better boy at home, and tries to keep his room clean. But not long after that, his mom leaves, and he's now 15, and he has seen her a handful of times. He said, obviously, she didn't care about me. See the seed? And he said, I quickly decided, too, that obviously I failed, so I'm pretty much a failure. Failure, and and she doesn't care about me. And at the end of, as we're in the middle of the session, the therapist stops and she looks at me, and she looks at him, and she said, I'm so confused. I'm really confused. I don't understand. She's like, for the teacher, she said, they're constantly saying that you don't care and you don't do anything they ask you to do. Like, you don't do anything. She's like, but for me, she said, you were the first one in the after-school program to take the chairs and put them on the table. She said, you're the first one that comes to me and asks if you can sweep the floor. She's like, I don't get it. I don't understand. And in that moment, I got it. Remember last night we talked about love responds to love? And the flowers and the trees will grow around the shadows to get to the sun? And our subconscious will do the same thing. Remember the therapist at the beginning of the session, what she was saying to him? He's a good boy. He's a good kid. What was his heart doing? Gravitating to her, and she was actually pulling weeds from his garden and didn't even realize it. And he was responding to her words. And another thing, I remember I began seeing a pattern with all of this. Not long after that, I had a grandma that was sharing with me about her son-in-law. And she had said that her son-in-law and his sister, when they were little, the dad had died in a wreck. And it was a horrible event, died in a wreck, of course. I mean, obviously it was horrible, but the young man blamed himself. And he had all these weeds of anger and just rage and aggression for years. But in a random conversation, when he was about 11 or 12, his sister, he said something and it cued the sister in, and she said, well, hold on a second. That wasn't your fault that Dad died when we were little. She said that Dad and Mom got in a fight. Mom tried to get Dad not to leave, and he left anyways. That wasn't your fault. That was Dad's. And in one moment, all the guilt and the shame that child had carried for years left because of her words. Our words can literally set people free. We have life in our tongues. We can help children be free. I think truth sets us free one memory at a time. That's just what happens. And so that's really important to understand that kids will tell you, another thing is they will tell you what their seeds are. Do you remember, I shared with you that the young man was always saying, you don't care, I don't care, it doesn't matter, who cares? He was projecting what he believed about himself on the teachers and everyone around him. Because for him, he had believed he was a failure, right? So if I can't save my family, the most important thing in my life, what does it matter if I do my homework? Do you see that? So it didn't matter. Who cares? It don't matter. He was telling us the whole time what his seeds were. And the other thing he was saying, I don't care. It don't matter. His mom didn't care, right? He believed his mom didn't care about him. So he was continuously doing that. Watch children. If you'll step back and put your new lenses on and you see the heart, kids will tell you what their seeds are and they'll show you. Think about your kids that bully. And they say things like, you're stupid, no one loves you. What do you think their seeds are? I'm stupid, no one loves me. I promise at the root of every bully or pride is literally self-hatred. And they're just projecting. They've got self-hatred lenses on, so they're projecting it on everybody else. And they're constantly trying to look at me, look at me, look at me, because they're trying to get something that they can't get. Self-confidence. You love yourself. You have clear lenses on, and you'll project love. Another thing I want to show you is this young man, and then I'll go forward. This young man, do you understand why he was smoking pot and drinking alcohol? He gave up, right? He needed something to numb the pain. Do you think that your family failed because of you at 4 years old? We wonder why these teenagers drink and do drugs. He's not a bad kid. He was a good kid, but he had really yucky weeds in his garden. And we can't judge his garden based off on his weeds. Thank goodness no one judged my garden based off of my weeds. We have to do the same for kids. We have to see the garden. We can't see the weeds. So once again, we want to continuously speak and show unconditional acceptance, love, and security with children and teens. Pull weeds with our words and actions. Listen to them. Kids many times just come right out and say it. Nobody loves me. My friends don't love me. Speak the opposite. You're loved. You're valuable. Speak the 7 and 8 needs if you don't know what else to speak. That'll hit it. Start speaking to their heart. When your child comes home and says, everybody hates me, I love you. You are so loved. You are so valuable. That's very, very important. You cannot sow enough love into a child's garden. Okay? Once again, I talked about the bully and the projection, but here's another thing. Kids will play out what they believe and what they feel, and they'll play out their seeds. I had a teenager once I worked with who, from the outside looking in, had it all figured out. She was beautiful, she excelled, she was an excellent athlete, she had excellent grades, she was in pageants, she was always trying to be better and better and better. And but what was happening was she was one-upping everybody. I'm better than you. She had this just aurora about her, right? Well, then naturally what happened? People don't like that, and so kids start hanging out with her. So then she started having depression and anxiety because nobody wants to hang out with me, okay? So when she came to work with me, I explained the garden analogy, and we started digging. We ended up in a memory of when she was little, and she got off the school bus, and her brother they both had a report card or grade or something, and her brother had done well, but she hadn't done so well. And her mom and dad, great mom and dad, they started bragging on the older brother and telling him how great, thank you, did so great, but they said nothing to her. And kids, remember the illogical thinking, we talked about that earlier? Automatically she assumed, my grades aren't good enough, then I must not be good enough. They can't separate themselves from the weeds because society hasn't. So if my grades are bad, I must be bad. So what did she start doing? I'll be better. I'll try harder. Remember that little addiction I told you about? All or none? I'll do anything it takes to be good. And she was constantly pushing everyone away. She had risen to the top, but she had pushed everyone away. But she was showing us the whole time what her seed was. I'm not good enough. Because she was constantly trying to be better. So if you put your ears and your eyes on, your new set of ears and your new set of eyes, you'll see and you'll hear these things. So be creative and intentional. When kids are telling you what their seeds are, if your own child is at home telling you all the time how much no one loves him and you hate me, be creative. Take sticky notes and say the opposite. You are so loved. You are so special. And put it on the back of the toilet seat. When they wake up in the morning and they go to the bathroom, they're going to be like, oh my gosh, you're so dumb, Mom. But at the same time, their little heart's going to be like, yeah, you know what I mean? Look at me. Be creative. I tell teachers, I'm like, be intentional. For the kid that's always coming to school and saying how no one loves her and I don't care, put little sticky notes and say, I care about you. You are so loved and valued. When they get to school, put it in underneath their desk. Don't think that when that child pulls that out and sees that, teacher did that for me, you know they're going to feel special. Put notes in their backpacks, in their folders when they go home. You never know what a kid's going to go home to. They could be in the middle of a raging fights and abuse. But you know what? They can go to their safe place, or if they get to, for a second, they can read the note from you. It's worth it. Hang in there. You're amazing. I also tell teachers, have lunch with kids. You don't have to follow societal norms. The kid that's on the playground that's over there by themselves that never socializes, go sit with them. What are you doing when you sit with them? You're telling them that I care about you. You're showing with your actions that you care. Those things are so, so important. We're going to play a little clip. Have you all seen the help. For those of you that haven't, just to kind of give you kind of a little history here, this young woman, she basically is trying to live up with the Joneses and trying to live that life. And she's constantly saying things, really sowing negative seeds, sad seeds in her kid's garden. At one point, she calls, I think, the little 3-year-old fat. And the sweet nanny, whether consciously or subconsciously, she gets it. And this is what she does every chance she gets.
Smart. You is important. You is smart. You is kind. You is important. Oh, that's so good.
So that, if you even just do that every morning, start with one thing. I tell teachers, you get lots of information thrown at you. So start with one thing. Start with that. Every day, wake up and tell your kids you are smart, you are kind, and you are important. Until they're blue in the face. Easy, right? What we're doing is we're speaking love and happy seeds into a child's garden. You never know when the one you throw at them might unlock a belief or a seed that was planted. We can't stop seeds from getting planted. I hope one day we can, because that's the end result of seed digging, is that they learn how to do it themselves. They learn to stop and listen to love and be like, I don't want to believe that. So the end result is that all of our kids will be able to seed dig by themselves. But right now, they're not there yet. So we have to help teach them how to do it. Second, very important thing is we have to separate the weeds, the garden from the weeds. And I touched on this earlier, but I'm going to try to elaborate a little bit more. When we discipline, we have to discipline to correct the behaviors, not change the child. Once again, a societal norm is, I'm bad when I do bad things, I'm good when I do good things. And that is just, when your identity is rooted in what you do, it's awful. Because think about when that child whose identity is based on basketball and excelling, and then he gets a huge job at a big company, he makes all this money, and then he retires, or he gets fired. Now all of a sudden my identity is rooted in this, so I am what I do. Well, what happens when your job's over? My life's over. There's been lots of suicides from that too. If we root our identity in our behaviors, we've missed it. And this is even ingrained in our preschool students. I'll never forget my little Lily when she was 2. She was at a daycare and she came home and she had her little checklist. Lily bad, Sally good. And she's just going through this little list. And I'm like, you're not bad, Lily. Oh my goodness, you're not bad. I didn't get a Tootsie today. So she was bad. I'm telling you, the prison systems are full of people with that seed, that I am bad. This becomes the projection screen. You'll either turn it back on yourself and hurt yourself, or you'll hurt others. You have to change your lenses. And we have to remember that, once again, kids cannot always separate themselves from what they do. Why? Because society doesn't know how. So our little preschoolers identify themselves based on what they do. So we have to start changing that. We have to separate the child from the behavior. And this is how we do that. Start focusing on the heart. Your heart is good. But we have to train your hands to be as kind as your heart. My little Bella, when she goes to timeout, I try to say this. I don't do as much as I need to, but when she's in timeout, I'll say, now you need to teach your little hands. When you're in timeout, you tell those hands to listen to your heart, to be good like your heart, to be kind like your heart, because they're getting you in trouble. I'm teaching her to separate. You can't whack Sissy upside the head. You're going to have to go sit in timeout. You can still discipline quickly, but you do it in a way that you separate the heart from the actions. And sometimes it's, you need to go time out because you just whacked Sissy upside the head. You're going to have to teach your hands to be nice like your heart, kind like your heart. Or you are a very kind and respectful young man. Let's teach your words to be truthful like the good man that you are. We got to teach them. And so I take shame away from kids because kids are so accustomed to thinking there's something wrong with me and I'm bad for what I do. So I think that's one of the big keys when I do a seed digging session is that I automatically reset the child's brain. I don't think there's anything wrong with you. And I really don't. I think you've got weeds in your garden. You're just believing something that isn't true, but your heart's beautiful. How many kids have really heard that? Think about the ones that are in the system and they're in trouble all the time. What do you think that would do to them if you were the one that pulled them aside and said, hey, listen, you're a good boy. I see it. You may not see it yet, but I see it. Now, we're going to have to get your behaviors to mimic your heart, and we'll get there. But your heart's good. There's nothing wrong with you. Okay? Couple more. Your word choices that haven't been very nice today. You're a very nice girl, so please use words that are as nice as you are. You're a wonderful person, so please don't say mean things about yourself. I like you just the way you are. You're constantly separating, but you're speaking to the heart. Validate and reflect the child's feelings. This is very important. Help them feel heard. Excuse me, do you remember, in the previous session, one of the things that I talked about was the African mission trip, right? And basically being in a different culture and not understanding the cultural norms and obviously probably the language is going to be different. There's going to be a big barrier. Well, a child is very much like that. And they don't always read you, and they have something to say. They always have something to say. But you know what we do? Shut your mouth. Go to your room now. I've been guilty of that too. So what I'm trying to shift that mindset, change that societal norm, let them say what they need to say. Now, you might be heated in the moment. You may say, I'm going to let you talk in just a few minutes, but you need to go to your room and cool down, and Mommy's going to cool down. In about 5 minutes, I'm going to let you say whatever you need to say. Or here's a pen and paper. Go in there and write how angry you are. My little Lily, I tell her to go talk to Jax, her puppy dog. Go tell your puppy how mad you are at Mommy, okay? But this is still how it's going to be, and we'll talk about it. Because if you don't get that, let the child get that out, guess what's going to happen? You're stuffing them. And their voice, if they begin to believe that their voice is not important, many times they can believe I'm not important. So they start losing their voice. They don't speak up. So it's important. Let them say, and it may not make sense. Well, I'm so mad because, and she said this. Yeah, and I'm so sorry. That made you mad. Yeah, okay. Thank you for sharing that with me. Now you have to go to timeout for 5 minutes. You know? You can let them talk. Let them get it out. Have you ever been in a situation, even in adulthood, where you want to say, you have something to say to your spouse or to your boss, and you just don't know how to say it, and you're frustrated? Well, kids feel the same way, only even more so. So we have to let them speak, give them a voice. Here's another, I think we were talking about that, the trauma reminder. Another good thing to do is I need segments. This is another great way to help children communicate. We have this understood, you need to do things, and it's like a finger's in their forehead. You need to go to your room. Well, if you'll take the finger out of their forehead, even though you're not really putting it there, feels like you are, and say, I need for you to do this, you'll be amazed at how much you can de-escalate the situation. How many kids are so used to hearing, you? Would you rather hear someone tell you, you need to do this, or I really need your help? Okay? That's another little one that you can use. Here's a quote I absolutely love. Misbehavior in children, or let me read it. Children are just little people. Misbehavior in children is an attempt to communicate when all else has failed. Children have a drive to love other people and be a contribution to the people around them. It is time for all children to be recognized as the magnificent little people they are and accorded the dignity and respect that is due every human being. We must establish a new way of seeing children. I didn't write that. I got that off the internet years ago. We have to get that. Now, let me say something, too. A lot of times when I do trainings, people have all this shame. Oh, I didn't raise my kids like that. Let the shame go right now. Don't go there. You are free, okay? Because we learn things and we go forward. Don't beat yourself up. Because shame is a driver to lots of bad things. Don't let shame do that. So you are freed from that. With new information and new revelation, we go forward, okay? Don't let shame beat you up. Last one, give them options. Options can empower the child because they have other choices. I would rather have options than somebody tell me, it's this is how it's going to be. We like options, so why wouldn't we think children would like options? Give them options. Give them a safe way to express themselves. Teach them more positive ways to do this until the seed is completely pulled from their gardens. We have a societal norm that, once again, it has to be this or this. Kids need good discipline. That's just how it is. Well, of course they do. That's how we train them that's a part of the process. But you can give them options. You don't have to always spank them or tell them, go to your room. Be creative. Be creative. Sometimes options can be positive. Here's an example. Let's say a child is angry at another child and won't stop bothering her. And a positive statement, I'm reflecting the feeling, I can see you're upset with Gary, but I need you to stop making faces. Here's my options. Maybe you could write her a letter tonight to let her know how it made you feel. Or you could write a letter to me and tell me all about it. You'll shock the heck out of some kids. What? Yeah, it doesn't have to be negative. What you're doing is you're training that little part of the voice, the little child, which tomorrow we're going to talk about the two parts of our brain. You're training that little part of them to, it's okay to have options. You're respecting them. If I had someone from another country here and I was trying to train them how to follow our culture, I wouldn't be like, smack your hand, you did something wrong, right? That's not correct, You could give them options. It's really okay. Another one, a child is bullying the other children and laughing when they mess up. Positive statement. You really are an important person. Do you see what I'm doing? You really are an important person. And I really need you to not laugh at the other kids because they're important too. There's my options. If you find a funny book or hear a funny joke, I would love to share it with you. Or I'd love for you to share it with me later. I enjoy funny things too. You're unlocking things. Pulling weeds. Oppositional defiant basically is a subconscious control. When I feel out of control, there are kids that, there's kids that get I saw a special, I don't remember what channel this was, several years ago about a lady that had an addiction to eating toilet paper. And we think, that's bizarre. No, it's not. If you're in a moment of absolute desperation and helplessness, you'll grab at anything. Subconsciously, we do the same thing. Only sometimes kids have absolutely no voice. They're helpless. They're stuck. And the only power and control they have is, I'm not going to answer you. You can't make me decide. So that's their control. I'm not going to do it. So they're not bad for that. It's just that one can get you in a lot of trouble. But we grab at both physical addictions and also subconscious addictions. I see that as a subconscious addiction. Okay? I want to read this to you. Have you all heard of the Starfish story? I love the Starfish story, but this has a little bit of twist, and I like it a lot better. So I'm going to read this to you. A young girl was walking along a beach upon which thousands of starfish had been washed up during a terrible storm. When she came to each starfish, she would pick it up and throw it back into the ocean. People watched her with amusement. She'd been doing this for some time when a man approached her and said, "Little girl, why are you doing this? Look at this beach. You can't save all these starfish. You can't begin to make a difference." The girl seemed crushed and suddenly deflated. But after a few moments, she bent down, picked up another starfish, and hurled it as far as she could into the ocean. Then she looked up at the man and replied, "Well, I made a difference to that one." The old man looked at the girl inquisitively and thought about what she had done and said, inspired, he joined the little girl in throwing starfish back into the sea. Soon others joined, and all the starfish were saved. Isn't that a great story? So it takes every one of us. Those of you that are in the seed digging and freedom prayer ministry, you might be doing the one-on-one, but it takes every one of us to pull weeds from kids' gardens. When I go to schools, I say that. I train the entire district. If in a lot of them I do. I don't get the chance to do it in some of the bigger schools. But, if the teachers are pulling weeds from kids' gardens with their words and actions, and the counselors are pulling seeds out of their garden, and the mental health therapists are pulling them out of their garden, then we've got some really great things that can happen by the time this child is 18. Because the real world isn't near as pretty as the school system. And so we have a limited amount of time to reach these kids. And so it's going to take every one of us to pull. The last thing I want to share with you is a little story that I absolutely love. I had a dear friend several years ago that shared this with me. And he said that he was a principal somewhere in southern Arkansas. And he said that one day he was at school and the counselor called him and said, "You have got to read this, what this 7th grader wrote. You've got to read this." And he prefaced the story, before he read it, he prefaced it with, this teacher, this little 7th grader is talking about her English teacher. And he said the English teacher really hasn't done anything other than he makes it a point every day when kids walk into his classroom, he makes it a point to make eye contact and pat them on the shoulder. The girls he pats, makes eye contact and says, "How are you today?" And the guys he roughhouses, but he always looks them in the eyes and says, "How are you today?" That's really all he did. But the little girl had written in the journal, she had written that on 4 different occasions I had plans of going home to kill myself. The only reason I didn't was because I knew my English teacher would miss me. Sometimes it literally takes one tiny drop of water in a child's soil that is caked and dry to help them have life again. And every one of us in this room, we have that opportunity. We get to be the voice and the hands of love to so many kids. And we can start now and literally help change their little life and change the course of the next generation. Okay?